Okay, so we may have just gotten confirmation on the long-rumored Final Fantasy IX Remake being real, and we also got a little bit more information on Crisis Core Reunion. So, before we get into the news, if you guys could click the like button if you like what you hear, I would greatly appreciate it, as it really does help out my channel quite a bit. So starting off with that first story with Final Fantasy IX Remake, there is a YouTuber by the name of Paolo From Tokyo who I'm a huge fan of. I've been watching his content for years. He does this really fascinating, well-done series called A Day in the Life of, where in Japan, he follows a different worker every video from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to work to the moment they come home and wind down. And these are people from a number of different professions, from, students to people who work in ramen shops to people who work in delivery services. It's a really fascinating look at Japanese work culture. And if you have even the slightest passing interest in Japan, I would highly recommend you watch them. The videos themselves are absolutely high quality and you can learn a lot from watching them. And his most recent video he uploaded over the weekend follows a young woman by the name of Ruby who happens to work as an art illustrator at Square Enix. So, to my surprise, when I started watching this video, I'm like, holy crap. She works for Square, and she works on games like Chocobo GP. I believe she even had some work in Brave Exvius. So there's a lot of things that she's done with this company. And what has people talking is, at some point in these videos, Paolo leaves the worker alone because there's things they have to do, and he will wander around the area and just kind of talk to people. He talks to the people that run the motion capture studio, and that's the place where they recorded all the mocap for FF7 Remake. He gets to try on the motion capture suits. He gets to go to the studio where they record all of the voiceover. But what has people talking is he talks to one of the other art illustrators there by the name of Toshiyuki Itihana, who was the character designer for Final Fantasy IX. And this has got people talking because he says in the video he's working on a project that he cannot show or even talk about yet. And this guy loves Final Fantasy IX. He's expressed interest in the past and wanting to remake that game and how much he loves it. And on his desk, he's got nothing but FF9 figurines, and he's got this really beautiful and expensive statue of the final battle between Zidane and Kuja before Kuja casts Ultima and just wipes out the whole party. It's a really beautiful statue. I think it's over $1,000. And this has got people, including myself, talking like, okay, you're working on a game that you can't talk and you love Final Fantasy IX and there's all of these figurines, and the fact that that NVIDIA GeForce leak showcased one of the games on that list being Final Fantasy IX Remake. This is all just kind of leaning towards the fact that, hey, maybe he's actually working on that remake. And this NVIDIA list is not just some list someone made up. It's been pretty accurate so far. If I'm not mistaken, every game that was on that list has either come out already or has been announced. Almost everything, except for like Injustice 3. We don't know if that's happening. Final Fantasy Tactics was listed alongside 9, but even games like Chrono Cross Remaster and Kingdom Hearts 4 were on that list. So this list has been pretty accurate, and I'm starting to believe that maybe he is working on FF9. So obviously this is just baseless speculation here, but it's really fun to talk about. I loved Final Fantasy IX, and the fact that this game could get a remake is really fascinating because it's like, of all the games they picked, why go with 9? But I am super enamored. We know it's getting an anime as well, so potentially, hopefully next year, I'm crossing my fingers, Square actually comes out and announces this. I need to know more. I want to see next gen Vivi. Getting to the Crisis Core info, this comes to us from Xenosaga 7, who I think I've actually sourced on this channel once before, so it's kind of nice when someone you've sourced a while ago comes back and they provide some new information. But there was a recent interview done for a Korean website where they interviewed Katase, Sato, and Nomura, and they gave just a few more clarifications in regards to Crisis Core Reunion. So the first thing being, there will only be rearranged music in the game, so we cannot pick the OG music from the PSP version. I don't know if they've talked about this before, but I think that's pretty understandable. There might even be tracks from the OG game that they might not be able to use because of licensing issues or copyright issues, but it makes sense to not go back and use the old music, especially since everything has been remastered and rearranged for that soundtrack. They also continue to reiterate that nothing in the story has changed from the original, which again, it makes sense. You have to know what Zack goes through in order to really appreciate his story, you know, so they can't just go changing that last minute. It's just going to be weird. And also with them doubling down on the fact that Crisis Core is still going to be the same, it also kind of gives credence to the fact that Rebirth and the final part of the trilogy are going to be different. So one of the main things in OG Final Fantasy VII that's a huge mystery is the unraveling of Cloud's actual backstory, who he actually is. We all know he's the unreliable narrator and the things that he's saying aren't true. Eventually we find out who Cloud is and what his background is and what he's been through, but now that we already know that, there's two things I think that could potentially happen now in Rebirth. Sephiroth might find a way to control Cloud and we might end up having to fight him, which could lead to Cloud's backstory in this one being even more darker and heartbreaking. But also, Zack now being alive in his own timeline could also be a brand new mystery for this franchise. Where is Zack now? How did he survive? What's his new mission now going to be going forward? So finding out more about Zack and what his ultimate goal is going to be could also be a secondary story point that provides more mystery for the player. They talk about the ending of Crisis Core seemingly contradicting with the story of FF7 Remake. If you play until the end of 7 Remake trilogy, you will understand why there's no contradiction, which I think just gives credence to the fact that this is a completely different timeline. So we had the OG Crisis Core where Zack dies and the OG Final Fantasy VII plays out, Advent Children happens, Dirge of Cerberus happens, and I think this timeline we're in now with the 7 Remake trilogy is brand new, so that makes sense to me. They considered using Reunion for the Remake trilogy, but instead ended up using it for Crisis Core because it didn't quite match what they were going for with Remake and Rebirth. They also talk about not doing a Dirge of Cerberus remaster or remake because it does take place 3 years after the main story of Final Fantasy VII, so it's way past what we're talking about now and it doesn't really make sense. And also, if you're gonna do a Dirge remake, you really gotta overhaul that combat system. It can't be a Crisis Core situation where you improve upon it. Everything for a Dirge needs to be redone from the ground up. That is a really weird playing game. And then they do end it by talking about before Crisis, and one of the reasons why they're not doing a remake or remaster of that is because initially it was only released in Japan. So doing a remake/remaster for a game that never hit outside of Japan doesn't really make that much sense. So yeah, this is all really exciting. Final Fantasy IX, I hope we start to get more concrete information on this game. I hope Square announces it next year. To go back to that world and just revisit those characters would be phenomenal. And then in regards to Crisis Core, it's just kind of stuff that we've already talked about, just confirming that not too much will probably change. So that's pretty much the video. I am Curious Corduroy. Please leave any of your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. What do you think about Final Fantasy IX Remake? And do you think this illustrator is working on FF9 Remake and he can't talk about it? What are your actual feelings for FF9? Were you a big fan of it? Because it really hit me pretty hard when I was a kid. I played 7 when it came out, 8 when it came out, and then 9 when it came out, and then 10 was like the last Final Fantasy that really grabbed my heart until I played Final Fantasy 15. So leave any thoughts down below. What do you think about that? What do you think about Crisis Core? Do you think they're going to change anything, or do you think it'll stay the same? I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.